Deputy General Secretary of the People's National Party, Nikisha Burchell, has confirmed that Councillor for the Morant Bay Division in the St. Thomas Municipal Corporation, Rohan Bryan, otherwise called Washi, has died. It's understood Mr. Bryan, who had a history of heart problems, died at about 2 a.m. Mr. Bryan is a former deputy mayor in St. Thomas. He polled 1,879 votes in the February 26 local government elections to beat the JLP's Wilbert Walker by 423 votes. The Ministry of Finance is reporting an underperformance in revenues for the 2023-24 fiscal year, which ended on March 31. That could have implications for the budget for the current fiscal year. The Finance Minister, Dr. Nigel Clark, made the disclosure on Tuesday.
Now, total expenditure for the full year was $104 billion higher than the previous year, or 12.7%. However, it was under budgeted for the full year of 23-24 by 14.4 billion or 1.5%. Although expenditure was below program by these levels of $14.4 billion, it was not enough to outweigh the revenue shortfall, resulting in a fiscal surplus of $1.1 billion or 0.04% of GDP instead of the budgeted fiscal balance of $9.1 billion or 0.3% of GDP.
Government revenues for 2023-24 were $97.5 billion, or 11.8% more than the previous fiscal year, but that outturn was $22 billion less than the budgeted target. Similarly, tax revenues for 2023-24 were 10.5% or $78 billion more than the previous fiscal year, but it fell $25 billion below the figure forecast in the budget. Meanwhile, Dr. Clark says despite the shortfall, Jamaica remains on track for significant reductions in its debt to GDP ratio.
Although the targeted fiscal balance surplus was only 0.04% of GDP instead of 0.3% of GDP as programmed, the country should note that given the fiscal balance overperformance in the fiscal year 2021-22 and the program outturn in 2022-23, the downward trajectory of the debt towards the legislated 60% of GDP target by 2027-2028 is slightly ahead of target and not adversely affected by this fiscal balance outturn. Debt to GDP as at March 2024 is estimated at 72.2%, with an expectation that it will be in the mid-60s by end of March 2025. And so the trajectory to target is well on track.
Meanwhile, the Finance Ministry says the main contributor to the shortfall was corporate income tax. This as several businesses and individuals failed to make the requisite tax payments on time. Dr. Clark says the implications for the current fiscal year will become clear once Tax Administration Jamaica has received those payments.
The sharply lower revenues in March 2024, particularly with respect to corporate income tax, as compared to what was budgeted, has implications for the revenue estimates for 2024-2025. I thought it important enough to inform the public promptly and transparently. However, as stated in my release, the Tax Administration Jamaica reports that there were significant instances of tax filings made in March 2024 without the requisite payments. We will therefore have to await the results of TAJ's follow-up with respect to those accounts prior to being definitive about any adjustments that may be required.
Dr. Clark says the government remains committed to its agenda and obligations as set out in the estimates of expenditure for the current fiscal year.
I wish to reiterate that revenues were up 11.8% or $97.5 billion in 2023-24 over 2022-23. The government is committed to transparency in fiscal affairs and hence the prompt release of this information as soon as it was finalized. And the government is also committed to meeting its legislated fiscal targets.
Dr. Nigel Clark, the Minister of Finance and the Public Service. Meanwhile, the Finance Ministry says the main contributor, well, we read that story already. Tourism Minister Ed Bartlett says the industry has continued its upward growth in 2024. During his presentation in the sectoral debate in the House of Representatives on Tuesday, the minister said both visitor arrival numbers and earnings have increased. Siobhan Campbell tells us more.
According to Mr. Bartlett, despite difficulties on the global stage, including high inflation and geopolitical instability, Jamaica remains a key tourism destination.
Jamaica's pioneering role in various aspects of the tourism industry has significantly influenced the global perception of our destination, establishing it as a top choice for visitors worldwide. I'm thrilled to announce that tourism is experiencing an unprecedented surge, surpassing all projections outlined in the previous fiscal year. Mr. Speaker, our key markets demonstrated strong performance. The U.S. maintained a majority stake in the overall market of some 74%.
This, he says, has resulted in significant growth for tourism over the last year.
Stopover arrivals for last year was 2.96 million, reflecting a 9.4 increase, while cruise was 1.34 million and up by 9% from the previous period in 2022-23. Preliminary gross earnings, Mr. Speaker, was 4.38 billion, and I want to make a point about that, because even at 9.6% ahead of last year, 4.38 billion is the largest revenue flow from tourism in the history of the tourism industry in Jamaica.
Minister Bartlett says this sterling performance has continued into 2024.
Just to show that that growth was not a flash in the pan for the year. 2024 began with a bang. And the first 3 months of 2024, we have already cleared 1.34 million visitors, earning 1.27 billion US dollars for Jamaica. And that represents, of course, 788,000 stopovers, or 7.4% increase. Cruise has come back, 554,560 cruisers, representing a 16.1% increase over the corresponding 3 months last year.
Mr. Bartlett says these gains translate to billions in revenue for the Jamaican government alone, without counting the gains made to the economy.
The TEF fees, the $20 per head, provided 59.2 million US dollars last year, or 9.2 billion Jamaican dollars. Our departure tax, 103.5 million US, or 16 billion Jamaican dollars. Airport improvement fees, 4.6 billion. Airline passenger levy, 9.2 billion. Passengers fees and charges, 11 billion. GAT, which is the room tax, 3.6 billion. A total direct revenue flow straight into the Council Fund of 345.8 million US dollars, or 53.6 billion Jamaican dollars.
Siobhan Campbell for Nationwide News.
Thank you, Siobhan. King's Councillor Michael Hilton says a reluctance by our political leaders is among the main reasons that Jamaica is still in bed with the UK-based Privy Council.
I don't think, and my views on the transition from Jamaica's final appellate court to the CCJ, I think are well known by people who know me. I think that's something that Jamaica should have done some time ago, and should absolutely do now. There's a reluctance to make the change. Part of that is that thing I mentioned in response to Ms. Calder, just the hesitation to change anything because of the risk that it might turn out not to be sufficiently popular with the majority. But I think it goes deeper than that in relation to this issue.
Casey Hilton says for some reason Jamaicans are nervous and uncertain about full self-governance.
There is a self-doubt. There is a feeling among our people that we can't safely govern ourselves and that we can't trust ourselves to govern. And we are more comfortable with being governed by persons from the past who have governed us in the past. I think that's part of the issue that causes the hesitation in this particular case. And that's a government point. That's a people point. That's a feeling and reaction of many of our citizens, our fellow citizens.
Michael Hilton, King's Council, he was speaking on Tuesday during a meeting of the Rotary Club of Kingston. Murder-accused Omar Colmore has denied the allegation that he orchestrated his wife's murder to claim money from her lucrative life insurance policy. That policy was worth over $100 million. In a sworn statement in the Supreme Court in downtown Kingston on Tuesday, Colmore professed his love for his wife, Simone Campbell Colmore. He told the court he would never do anything to hurt her. Simone was shot and killed along with her taxi driver, Winston Walters, on January 2, 2018 on Stanley Terrace in Red Hills, St. Andrew. Robian Williams reports.
It was revealed in court that both Simone and Omar Colmore had two separate identical life insurance policies, one issued in 2015 and the other in 2017. Simone's policy in 2015, valued at $21 million, had Colmore and their children as the beneficiaries. The insurance policy in 2017, valued at $80 million, also had Colmore and the children as beneficiaries. He was allotted 70% of the policy, while the couple's two children were allotted 15% each. But Colmore insists that he had no knowledge of the details of the policy. He only signed the documents. He stated further that he's never seen the policy nor asked how much it was valued. According to Colmore, he would have never agreed to be the beneficiary of the lion's share of the policies. When pressed further, he stated,
"Because we have two children. If anything happened to me, Simone wouldn't need the money. If anything happened to her, I wouldn't need the money because we're both business people. The beneficiaries would be the kids."
Colmore's attorney Dan Jobson asked him if there was any truth to the claims that he had his wife killed for the insurance payout. He responded,
"No, none at all. I had nothing to do with the policies. I didn't even know where the papers were. Ma'am, I love my wife. There was no reason my wife, period. I love my wife dearly."
At this point, Ms. Jobson questioned his extramarital affair with his ex-lover who testified against him earlier in the trial. Colmore admitted that the affair started in the latter part of his marriage. He added that when Simone found out, it became more stressful as they were already having marital problems. He said,
"At the Campbell's residence, when you speak to your wife, you're speaking to her mother and father. When you try to advise your wife on certain things, you have to walk on eggshells."
Colmore claimed that he and Simone spoke and she understood why he stepped out of the marriage. He went further, saying,
"I felt unwanted, like I wasn't a man. Me not being comfortable with my own wife, feeling like I'm a boy. You have your wife and she seeks approval from her mom or her dad. She understood, so that's why we rekindled. I made mistakes, yeah, but it's not like it didn't come from a beginning issue. It was shown in therapy that there was a beginning issue."
Colmore told the court that he and Simone relocated to Jamaica from the United States in 2010 after they tied the knot to take up a business opportunity her parents offered. They both lived with Simone's parents up until September 2017. Colmore moved out of the Campbell's residence following an altercation he had with Simone after she accused him of cheating. Based on evidence, Simone moved in with her husband in an apartment approximately a week before she was killed. The trial will resume on Wednesday morning at 10. Robian Williams for Nationwide News.
Thank you, Robian. Overseas now. Protesters have clashed at pro-Palestinian encampments in Los Angeles, hours after police cleared a similar protest in New York. At the University of California, Los Angeles, UCLA, Vice Chancellor Mary Osako says horrific acts of violence occurred at the encampment. She says the university immediately called law enforcement for mutual aid support. At Columbia University in New York, police arrested protesters nearly 24 hours after they took over an academic building. NYPD officers entered the occupied building, Hamilton Hall, through a second-story window using ladders. U.S. universities have been gripped by protests as students demand a boycott of all companies and individuals with ties to Israel.